we're introducing one of my favorite people in this world that has really, I can say, changed my life through his transmissions and through his book. Some of you know the Gene Keys, some of you don't. I encourage you to look into it. It speaks about the technology of human beings, which is one of the most beautiful technologies that we have here on Earth. And it's an algorithmic translation of who we are. And we're all unique pieces of this species. And I think Gene Keys really is able to capture that uniqueness and put it in an algorithmic way, translated in a way where we can find a path back to ourselves, to who we are and what we're here for, which for me are the most important questions.
Using ancient technologies into a...
Based on ancient technologies of I Ching and astrology.
So open your minds, because this is going to be special, because Richard doesn't speak much, so very special.
Very rare. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Richard.
Thank you.
Give you a hug. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So maybe like to just get an idea of like who's in the room. Who's heard of the Gene Keys in here? Hands up. Thank you. Who hasn't heard of the Gene Keys in here? Okay, quite a lot of you.
Wow.
Who's had a life-transforming event from the Gene Keys? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, cool. Thank you, Mihai. That was a really interesting talk about blockchain. And, you know, a lot of the stuff that you're hearing this weekend is around technology and technological advances. And I'd like to kind of propose an addition to the conversation, which is that the ultimate technology is us. And that no amount of external technology, no matter how amazing it is, can kind of save us until we've developed and transcended and used the technology that's actually inside us. And the Gene Keys is about that. It's about, well, what's actually latent inside human beings, inside our body, inside our DNA. And I should say that I'm not a scientist. In fact, I'm a poet. So what you get from me is you get a poet's view of DNA, which is a bit unique and a bit different. And I call these keys, the Gene Keys, the algorithms of awakening, and I'll do my best to explain what I mean about that. But many people ask me, like, how did this start? You know, so it's kind of nice to maybe tell you a little bit of that story. You know, many people... you know, we put a lot of importance on knowledge, and most of the ways in which we get information is through looking for knowledge. And the Gene Keys didn't come through looking for knowledge. It actually came another way. It came through revelation, which is a bit of a different way of getting truth. And revelation is a mysterious thing, and it can't be predicted, and I wasn't expecting it, but essentially I woke up one morning in my bed, and I woke up fully into a different state of consciousness, just from my sleep, you know, in an unexpected way. And for 3 days and 3 nights, I stayed in that state of consciousness, and every single cell of my being was lit up with light from within. It was luminescent. I don't know how else to explain it. It was a bit like this. And in those 3 days and in those 3 nights, and there wasn't any sleeping, I traveled through the universe. I traveled through, you know, time and space and different dimensions, and a lot of things were shown to me and revealed to me, and I remembered what I was and who I was, and I saw, you know, it was one of those, it was a strange situation. Anything I wanted to know, I could know. You know, imagine that at your fingertips. Anything you want to know, you can know it instantly. So I asked a lot of questions, and I did some research. And the result, about 7 years later, was what I call the gene keys. And I wrote a book. And it took me a long time, by the way. After I came down from that experience, I kind of had a lot of troubles. I kind of went through a period of thinking I was the Messiah. I went through a period thinking I was mad, delusional. I went into denial. It didn't happen. I'm just going to be ordinary. I went through lots of different phases, and eventually it all started to coalesce inside me, and I started to write this book. And this book, called The Gene Keys, is based on the Chinese I Ching, which is an incredible book. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit here today. Hopefully this is going to work. Do I have to point this somewhere?
No, you don't.
No, good. Ah, yes. Okay. So when I was a boy growing up, my greatest favorite myth was always the myth of King Arthur and the sword and the stone. And, for me, this is what the gene keys are all about. They're about pulling the sword out of the stone. And only you can draw your sword out of your stone. And your stone is your DNA. It's encoded in there. So each one of us has a genius inside us, encoded. And the gene keys are here to just help us access and identify what that might be. And then we can unlock it, hopefully. But many of us, are finding ways of doing that anyway. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, some of the principles, the things that I realized through my experience of DNA, but through that experience of being flooded with light. The first thing is that I realized is that this DNA, this substance inside us that's in every single cell of our body, is this incredible superconductor. It conducts, electricity, light, waves, photons. It's electromagnetic in that sense. It's incredibly supersensitive. It's also 10 billion miles long. So if you took all the DNA out of your body and it's crimped and folded and compressed in such an efficient way, if you took it all out and stretched it out, that's how long. I mean, just close your eyes for a moment and think about that. Inside your body is 10 billion miles worth of information code, that responds to light, that responds to frequency, that responds to the quantum environment. I mean, we're incredibly sensitive beings. That's why I was saying that the, electromagnetic, chemical, conduction capacities of the phosphates in our DNA are just remarkable. And of course, like technology, DNA uploads, downloads, and stores data. So you can, at any point, re-upload or download into another person. I'm downloading into you now, in a way. You're uploading from me. And I wonder what effect that might have. You might have an insight from here. You might have many things go on. And that's what we're doing all the time, interacting with each other and interacting with the world. We're constantly changing because of this super sensitive substance that's inside us. A little lesser known thing that was discovered by a Russian scientist is that DNA captures and weaves light around itself. And he developed a system called wave genetics. And he observed how the helix draws light towards itself. And I think light's a real key because it's the foundation of our cosmos and our universe. So a few more facts, or poets' facts, anyway. This is what I realized in my experience, that DNA, again, inside us is a wormhole. It behaves like a wormhole. And it opens up and forms these shapes, torus shapes, toroidal shapes, like this image here. And the torus is a fundamental principle of energy exchange in the universe. And so what we're looking at is, in a way, a universe inside us. We are a mirror of the universe and the workings of the universe. Also, the DNA is designed so it can harmonize with universal patterns through the phi ratios and through these golden ratios and these Fibonacci sequences and these beautiful perfect symmetries, supersymmetries that lie embedded throughout creation. So when you're really looking inside yourself, you realize all of that perfection is also there. And of course, being a wormhole, it therefore has the capacity to allow consciousness to transcend the vehicle itself and this time-space continuum, so allow us to actually access higher states, transcendental states of consciousness. And the thing about DNA also is it's not just like we've heard these stories about the third eye opening and things through our, different modalities, spiritual teachings. But in fact, the third eye is actually in every single atom of creation. It's in every single cell of the body. It's actually in every single cell of the entire cosmos. It's everywhere, that eye. And so when that eye opens in you, it opens up into everything, and it sees everything, and it sees through everything. And I know some of you probably may have dabbled with plant medicines and had some of those experiences. That's not personally been my path because I had a spontaneous awakening that didn't involve any of those things. But there are ways of accessing those higher states of consciousness, even through deep meditation and spiritual practice. A few more things. DNA is an open system. It has this incredible plasticity. As I said earlier, it's like we are so easily shaped and molded and remolded in ways that we don't realize often. Converts the frequency of the quantum environment into chemistry. That's kind of important. So whatever we're moving through, whatever belief systems and things we are involved in, it's converting that frequency into our chemistry. So our chemistry, the way we feel, the way our moods, our biorhythms, our biology, our health, all of that is how our DNA transfers and translates our attitude towards life. It also expands and it contracts according to thought and emotion and attitude. So there have been experiments that have been done around this where visibly DNA in a Petri dish has been shown to expand, contract, just as plants have been shown to expand and contract because they contain DNA, and form different shapes according to feelings and moods and words as well. Words and language is super important. DNA is a language. It's in a programmable language. It's a language we can understand. It's a language that geneticists can understand. It has sentences. And beginnings to the sentences and ends to the sentences. So it responds very well to our language, to the language and the words we use. So the words that we use and the words that we think are programming our DNA. Think about that. Every time you get into an argument and you get into one of those loops with someone, you're reprogramming that loop into your DNA over and over and over again. And also you can obviously use genuine words and you can use false words. So you could say nice words in a false way, but it's still, the DNA doesn't hear the word, it hears the frequency of the word. So language is hugely important in this whole process. And these are like basic things that lie at the core of my teaching with the gene keys. So I wanted to give you some fundamental principles here. I wanted to also say that it's changing, and this is something else that came to me in those 3 days and ever since, that we are now in a field where this substance is changing inside us as a species. And there was a prophecy that came through the gene keys when I wrote the book. As a big, thick book. And this huge prophecy came through about 2/3 of way through writing the book. And it's about this notion that we're in the midst of a change. And everything's changing inside us, which is why it's slowly being reflected outside us. So these new technologies on the outside are actually reflections of the technology coming online on the inside. And a lot of old programs are being, deleted from our system. And so we see that externalized in the world, a lot of things crumbling around us. So yeah, increasing sensitivity, triggering hormones that manifest higher capacities in our being, in our body, allowing us to more easily access heightened states like wisdom, like love, like being able to access, that quantum field and download kind of truth from it. And ultimately, the higher purpose of DNA is, according to me, to bring about this collective transformation of humanity and therefore the whole of Gaia. And that seems to be the kind of nub of the Gene Keys. And if that's a message that you resonate with, I think you'll enjoy the Gene Keys. Because the prophecy is that there's a new human coming. And it's happened in the past, that genes have taken us down forks and new species have emerged, and we see it through evolutionary biology. And every time it's happened, it happens very, very fast. It's usually always comes about as a crisis, as through turmoil, through increased heat and intensity and trauma, and that's what it takes sometimes to create these changes. So that was my little foray into some of the lesser-known properties of DNA. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll go on a bit more about where the Gene Keys are, what they're sort of rooted in. They're rooted in, because they came out of the original I Ching, and this is a map of the I Ching. The I Ching is a 64-fold structure made up of these things called hexagrams, these symbols with 6 lines. And it's an extraordinary thing, actually, because when you look into the 64-bit, the reason we're able to talk here now is because our technology is based on that same 64-bit technology. Our smartphones and everything, the binary coding, and there's lots of books being written on this, like the relationship between DNA, for example, and the I Ching. The I Ching, this ancient book that was kind of codified 5,000 years ago in China by an old sage looking at the back of a tortoise, gazing at the back of a tortoise. And then he suddenly had an epiphany, a bit like I had an epiphany. And then he just wrote down this thing. And it was just a series of information bytes and how they move. And they're literally, they are algorithms. That's what the I Ching is. It's this incredible old book. And it's been used for centuries as an oracle, and that's maybe only one of its functions, because I think it's through the Gene Keys I've learned it's capable of a lot more than just looking ahead and telling us what we should do. It actually shows us everything. It's like the FAQs of the universe are contained in this code, which is why we see it in nature and all these natural systems. So what happened then for me is I wrote down 64 words, and I wanted to bring it into human, I wanted this experience I'd had to be applicable and practical. So I created this spectrum of consciousness of these words, and I laid them out intuitively in 3 levels. I called it the shadow, the gift, and then the siddhi. And the siddhi is a Sanskrit word that I turned to, because there isn't really one in English. And it means divine emanation, or, it's like our highest possibility, manifest. So when you look at those words, they're in the middle line here: presence, sacrifice, fluorescence, empathy, light, virtue, peace, timelessness. And then you look at the shadows and you see they're all connected. So grace, which is the 22nd Gene Key, has a relationship to dishonor. And graciousness is the gift, right? So there's a whole spectrum, and I call this a spectrum of consciousness. And out of those words, I wrote a book. I wrote the Gene Keys book. And what it does is it gives us the human version of what this 64-bit technology looks like in our lives. So every single one of us, grapples with some of these themes. And the most important epiphany that comes out of this, and if you don't remember anything else tonight, but you only remember this, is that in every shadow is contained a gift. So in every difficult, challenging, horrible circumstance in our lives is an incredible gift. So if you just think right now, just tune in a little bit inside to like, what is your biggest challenge right now that you're facing? Every single person in this room has one, right? There's something right now that you are facing into, or maybe you're not wanting to face it, but it sits there and you do not know, how you're going to tackle it. And it's been there perhaps a long time. That's a shadow, perhaps. That's an obstacle. That's something that has a huge gift for you. And if you were able to really go deeply into that shadow, you would unlock that gift inside it. But the only way is through. You've got to go down into the underworld, as the ancients always have showed us, our shamans. You go down into the underworld, and then you grapple with the demon, or you wrestle with the angel, and then eventually, you come out and you emerge, and one of those gifts comes with it, and that's your genius, right? So our genius is actually hidden in our struggle and in our suffering. That's the message of the gene keys. And then these heightened states, that's our future. These heightened states, they're not just meant to be cute words, they're actually embodied experiences that can become permanent. That's the future. In the gene keys, so that the technology, how it works, is that there's this thing called a profile. I call it a hologenetic profile because it's holographic and it's a magical thing, and anyone can go onto genekeys.com and you can put in your birth data, and out of your birth data you'll get one of these profiles, free profile, and you can look at it, and there's a whole journey encoded in that profile. All your algorithms are in that profile, and so it's a way of sequencing through the I Ching, through this 64-bit technology that is embedded everywhere in the cosmos. It's a way of looking at what's my curriculum in this life. So yeah, it has a little bit of an astrological component because it's looking at your coordinates in the space-time continuum of when you arrived here, right? And I was thinking, shall I go down that rabbit hole? No, I don't think I'm going to. I was going to you want me to? Well, some people I have a friend who's a wonderful skeptic, who thinks all this is nonsense. And I love him to bits. And we have these wonderful conversations. And he says, what is this astrology stuff, the basis, And I said, look, the fractal universe is incredible. We're discovering through quantum physics and through all these things that everything seems to be a mirror of everything else. And there are these fundamental symmetries hidden throughout creation. And so the same inside us. And so the same with time. Why wouldn't you apply that to time? Every moment in time is a snapshot that has been repeated in an endless iteration from the beginning of time. So when you divide the movement of the sun into 64 sections, you're literally looking at the sequencing of time, of patterns in time. And that's what astrology is based on. Actually, the ancients really had a deep understanding of this. It wasn't so much about just looking at constellations. It was about encoding, the time continuum into our lives so that we could map it, so that we could then get wisdom about our lives and ourselves. So Gene Keys does the same thing in quite an amazing way, because it maps directly into the same programming as our DNA. Which is built at 64 codons, built out of sets of triplets arranged in sixes, exactly the same as the I Ching. And there are more symmetries under the surface the deeper you go. So in the gene keys, you then get these, in your profile, you get these three things. You get these three sequences. And it's all about sequences, because evolution operates in sequences. And we are designed to awaken fully in sequence. So we go through a transformation, and then we have an integration phase, and then we kind of settle into a plateau, and then another transformation comes to us, or an initiation in some way, if we pass it, if we pass that exam, then we go through another transformation, we get up to another level, and so the sequence goes on. So when we're looking with the gene keys, we're looking at specific patterns of initiation that lie embedded in individual lives. And it's quite fun. Even if you're a skeptic, it's quite fun to look at your own profile and look at the words in there, the gene keys that relate to you. And you unlock them in these 3 sequence patterns. Your purpose has to do with the first one, it's 4. And then the second one is the most complicated one. It's about love. It's the trauma patterns that we've inherited through our childhood. And so that through knowing the gene keys that relate to different stages of your childhood, different 7-year cycles where things occurred in different ways, you really begin to, what you end up with that one, I'll talk about it at the end as well, is you have a wound map, a map of your wounding patterns. It's like this is a heavy map to have in your hand, I tell you, because you have these incredible things, and it's just on a piece of paper, and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? And it was the same for me. I was like, I calculated it, I worked it all out, and I was like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? And I thought, well, I need to apply it to my life. So I started to apply these things to my life, and I started to contemplate these gene keys, my own codes. And the more I contemplated them, the more they came alive in my life. And I did them in a sequence, step by step. So I took the first one, and I looked at it, and in Gene Keys, the first one is called Your Life's Work, the one at the top up there. My life's work. My life's work is Gene Key 64, happens to be the last one, which is kind of fun in a way because I'm mapping the 64. But it's about confusion. The shadow is confusion. And for years, I was just confused. Like, all this stuff, I had no idea what to do with it. It's like this didn't have a pattern. It didn't have any shape. It didn't have a form. It was just in me. Can you imagine? All that stuff without any form. What the hell am I supposed to do with this? Happily, these forms and structures and things arrived, and many of them through relationships that I had and friends I made who gave me pieces of the jigsaw so that I could assemble this wonderful process. And so now working with the Gene Keys is going on a journey. And it's going on an inner journey that begins to initiate your own awakening even more than pretty much anything else out there, as far as I can testify anyway. So the third section, which you probably can't see because it's under the sofa, prosperity. So you have purpose, love, prosperity. And the fact that it's arranged in that sequence is really interesting. You can come in anywhere you like on the journey because it's holographic, but it's arranged in that sequence for a reason, because the first sequence inside us, the awakening, is about our individuality. It's about our genius. It's about finding our sense of inner purpose. And our inner purpose, once we've got that and we feel the core stability of that, then we're ready to move into our relationships because we know who we are. If you're in your relationships, but you don't have your purpose, your sense of true purpose activated, then you're just confused. You're lost in codependent patterns. You get merged with the other person, and you don't have an anchor for the self. So the first thing is you develop that purpose, and you really feel it, and you find it. And when you found it, you really know it, you feel it, and then you're ready to move to the second one. As I said, you can jump in any way you like, and you'll get an amazing teaching anyway. But this is like the recommended route. And then as you move into the terrain of relationships and love and the patterns that get in the way of love, because that's what the Venus sequence is called, shows us, because it's to do with positions of the planets Mars and Venus at the time we were born. It's funny how planets get attributed archetypal, symbolic meaning through the ancients. And we might just think, oh, well, that was flowery thinking or coincidence, but it isn't. Again, it was deep, intuitive knowing at some point And that's why it's entered into our collective, Mars and Venus. You know, this process of coming to terms with the polarities inside ourselves and then playing that out in our relationships and through our gender and through our identity questions and all of that. That's the field of this sequence called the Venus sequence. It's an incredible transformational journey that leads to an opening of the heart, ultimately, and hopefully a permanent opening of the heart. And then the Pearl is the final one, call it the Pearl sequence. And you can see it's a bit more up in the head, and it's to do with the opening up of the collective, you know, a collective aspect of our consciousness. So once the heart starts to open, we start to prosper in all kinds of ways. You know, so what everyone was saying, like, yeah, we need more love. If we have more love, then we have more abundance. And it's completely true. It's borne out by these sequences and algorithms. You know, that you have a specific algorithm for prosperity. Every single one person in this room, completely different, completely unique algorithm of prosperity. And prosperity isn't just making money. You know, it may not be making money, but it's prospering. It means you have to prosper in your relationships, you have to prosper in your health, you have to prosper in your connection to the earth, you have to prosper in your community. That, if you don't have all of that, it's not prosperity. It's just wealth. We know the wealth doesn't make us happy. Prosperity makes us happy. It's got to be a whole system phenomenon. So the Pearl is really powerful because it shows us how we're designed to operate in groups, in groupings. You know, it shows you your role in what I call the synarchy. The synarchy is like the self-organizing intelligence of the whole, opposite of anarchy. So I'm almost finished. This is an example I wanted to, because if you go to, you know, I'm hoping that if you're interested, you'll go to genekeys.com and you'll take a look and you'll get your profile. This is what a profile looks like up here. And you can see those words and lines. And then what I did is I created, over years, pathways to explore these journeys. And because I'm a bit of a loner, and as you heard, I don't come out that often and speak, I wanted to create something that someone could do on their own, in the comfort of their own life, you know, because that's how I am. So I created a series of online programs with videos and audios and meditations and journeys that also contain your gene keys within them. So if you do one of these programs, and there are many of them, they actually kind of are coded to your specific sequence. So you'll get your sequence, and then the program will talk you through your sequence. And it'll take you months. Just the first one will take you months because you have to contemplate these codes to activate them. And that's the power of contemplation, is that it's about digestion. And anything that's worthwhile takes time to digest, gene keys included. So there's no, you know, it may sound all very impressive, but it takes time and patience, and it's, you know, it's a very, very worthwhile thing to do, but it's not a quick fix. You know, awakening is not a quick fix. Contemplation is not a fast word. You've got to slow down, you've got to make space for it. You've got to, you know, you'll get given these algorithms, you know, take this one here. Here's an example. 42, line 2, right? There's always like a dot, and then there's a little number after it between 1 and 6. That's called the line number, because the gene keys are divided into these lines, 6 lines. And those line numbers have a specific patterning. And so if that's your purpose, celebration, detachment, expectation. Expectation is the thing that stops you fulfilling your purpose. It's your shadow. Like you keep being disappointed by life because you have all these expectations and you get lost in them, and then they don't come true, and then you're missing the core of your life purpose, which is if you learn to start detaching from the dreams that you have, and you can have your dreams and your intentions and things, but the more you learn to detach from them, that's the message of that specific key. So a bit of a Buddhist message there. then you begin to come into celebration of life. And then the second line also adds a color to that. You know, it's about posture. It's about finding your real sense of flow in life. And so that, you know, I can make these things sound nice, but it's your journey to unlock each one of these keys in your life as you move through the gene keys and your algorithms. But it works. And there are millions of people, or maybe not millions yet, thousands of people who have been using this and playing with it. And I'm always amazed because, as I said, I'm kind of hidden away often, and I'm not always aware of the impact that this stuff has. But every now and again I go out and someone comes up and goes, "Your work's changed my life. I don't know. I had this. I was going to get divorced, and then I didn't." You know. And I was like, "Wow, what happened?" And oh, the Venus thing changed me, you know. And so there's also some wilder stuff in here. I put a few things. There's some heightened downloads that also came through the transmission. It's a transmission of this wisdom, and so you'll see, you know, in there something called the seventh seal. There's this whole teaching, which I'm not going to say about, but it's on a different frequency. It's to do with higher dimensions and how we listen to and attune to higher dimensions and bring them into our body. And that also activates the keys inside us. So lots of different ways that you can move through the gene keys. And I wanted to finish by giving you an invitation. Over the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years, a whole team crystallized around this work, beautiful team of people. And we're based all around the world. And we worked together and we started creating these curated online retreats. And they've been incredible. And so what they do is they allow us to go collectively through the gene keys in a structured, paced, rhythmic way and learning from each other. And so we've used all the technology available at our fingertips to create these experiences. And it's quite remarkable. You know, and we have one beginning in November, if you're interested, and you can find details on my website. It's the Venus sequence one. It's the one about relationships. And it's 6 months long. You're like going, what? 6 months? The thing about the gene keys, it's about contemplation. So it's not fast, it's slow. You need a long time. And so what it does is it just sits there in the background of your life. And every week there's a little thing that you're asked to do, maybe watch a video, listen to a meditation, watch this audio, contemplate this gene key this month. You take one a month, one key, and you give it a whole month in your consciousness. And you go about your life, you know, and you may forget most of the time, but then every now and again you'll come back and you'll go, oh yeah, there's that gene key. He was saying about expectation. Damn, got me there. You know, and so it really reflects back to you living wisdom. And so my invitation to you is, if you're interested in coming on one of these journeys with me and a global community, we're about to start in November, and they take a lot of organizing and energy. As you can imagine, it's a long period of time. So we have a whole team globally that support, and we have community calls where the group comes together and then meets in chat rooms and talks about their keys together. And who you end up with is always really quite magical. And then there are group meditations and things along the journey, because there's a whole narrative to the journey. And the Venus work is especially about going back into our childhood patterns. And so what you'll find is, in doing that, they come to the surface. They bubble up to the surface, and you see them in your relationships. And they've been there all the time, but it gives you a language so that you can understand them and then move into deeper levels of forgiveness, and particularly those heightened aspects of your consciousness that you can see in your gene keys. So it gives you a view of yourself that is really beautiful, really beautiful. You know, because instead of looking at yourself as a bundle of like patterns, like expectation and disappointment, and you actually look at yourself as peace, or prosperity, or presence, or compassion, and these incredible cities, these incredible heightened states of consciousness that live inside our DNA. So I really recommend them, and that we go deep into like into a really powerful series of transformations. And I don't know when we'll do another one. We never quite know because they take so much. It might be 2 years from now we'll do another one. But I just happened to be here. I was passing through Paris. These guys invited me in. It was only like a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll do it. And it just happens to coincide with the beginning of this. So I reckon that that might be quite synchronistic, that you are here right now. I don't know why you came here either, but maybe this might be something you want to consider. Okay? I'll be around tomorrow in the middle of the day if anyone wants to hook up with me and ask me stuff. But yeah, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure.
Wow, Richard, yeah, you talked about synchronicity. Nothing was organized, right? Like, it's not like you never speak, as you said, and it just happened. Come, Magdalena, join us. It just happened.
Yeah, and you know, Magdalena and I, we met in New York some years ago, and we share this common love of Rodrigo, you know, who is this, I don't know if you've spoken about him, but it's nice to bring his name in here because I know he's up to trouble, you know. He's a trickster, and he passed away a couple of years ago, a year and a half, 2 years. And he was like a dear friend who brought us all together, and a massive visionary. And he said to you, he's going to be up to his tricks. So here he is.
He said to me, I will be guiding you from the other side. And we think he made this happen.
It's
right
his fault.
Yes.
What time are you coming back tomorrow?
Around the middle of the day, I thought, lunch.
Yeah, we have a break. We have a good 2-hour break, so we'll organize a little.
Great.
Whatever you need, we'll
PAUA.
organize. PAUA, absolutely. Yeah. And it's so... Thank you, because now I have 1,000 ideas. But we see Tony Fadell here, he created the iPhone with Steve Jobs. he's just after, I mean, just after you in a little. Yeah, I was thinking about Tony, you know, it's like creating products. You created a product here. It's a product.
It's a product. We're the product.
We have a product.
Yeah.
It's a transmission.
Yes, it's a I love the transmission.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your evening.